room must have gone silent when Netflix executives finally asked the question Meghan Markle had been dreading for months. Show us the numbers, real numbers, actual sales figures for American Riviera Orchard, the lifestyle brand they'd backed with their reputation and resources. According to sources close to the situation, that's when everything started to unravel. Because Meghan, in a move that perfectly captures her approach to business, allegedly refused to hand over the information. She simply wouldn't share the data Netflix needed to determine whether this partnership had any future at all. Think about that for a second. A major streaming platform, one of the biggest entertainment companies on the planet, asks for basic sales metrics from a brand they're actively supporting. And the response is no. Sources claim Meghan told Netflix executives they had no right to her sales figures, framing the refusal as though she were protecting some wildly successful empire from jealous corporate suits. The reality, insiders suggest, was far less glamorous. She either didn't want to admit how catastrophically the brand had failed, or she genuinely believed the numbers were so impressive that Netflix didn't deserve to see them unless they committed to continuing the partnership. Either way, that refusal marked the beginning of the end. Netflix had offered help repeatedly. They'd provided support with social media strategy, which Meghan declined. They'd invested in promotional opportunities, including potentially featuring her products in their new retail experience. But when it came time for basic transparency, the kind any legitimate business partner would expect, she shut them out completely. And Netflix, a company run by very clever people who can absolutely afford to walk away from a failing project, decided they'd had enough. The writing had been on the wall for months, honestly. From the disastrous launch earlier this year when American Riviera Orchard debuted without a trademarked name, with a website that barely functioned, and promotional videos that looked like they'd been thrown together in an afternoon. Harry's money had funded much of this venture, and yet nothing seemed professionally executed. Nothing suggested a serious businesswoman building a sustainable brand. It all felt rushed, poorly planned, and desperately thrown together by someone more concerned with the image of entrepreneurship than the actual work it requires. Netflix had given her every opportunity to succeed. They'd positioned her as this groundbreaking female entrepreneur, ready to revolutionize the lifestyle space with her refined taste and royal adjacent glamour. But glamour doesn't mean anything if you can't move product. Influence means nothing if nobody's buying what you're selling. And when a major corporate partner asks to see proof that the investment is worthwhile, refusing to provide that proof sends one very clear message: there's nothing worth seeing. The numbers, whatever they were, told a story Meghan desperately didn't want Netflix to read. But that demand would trigger a chain reaction neither side expected. The exclusion couldn't have been more public or more brutal. Netflix House, the streaming giant's flagship retail experience opening December 11th in Dallas, Texas, would feature immersive displays and merchandise from their biggest hits. Stranger Things memorabilia, Squid Game collectibles, Bridgerton-themed experiences. Everything that screamed Netflix success would have a place in this carefully curated space designed to generate buzz and celebrate the platform's cultural dominance. Everything except Meghan Markle's American Riviera Orchard products. Not a single jar of jam, not one candle, not even a token nod to the lifestyle brand they'd supposedly partnered with earlier this year. The message landed like a bomb in entertainment circles. This wasn't an oversight or a scheduling conflict. This was a deliberate choice to leave her completely out of their showcase moment. And here's what makes it even more devastating. Netflix House isn't really a traditional retail store. It's essentially a massive marketing opportunity disguised as a shopping experience. The whole point is generating excitement and giving fans tangible connections to shows they love. Real stores have to worry about inventory management, profit margins, whether products will actually sell. Netflix House doesn't operate under those same pressures. Throwing a shelf of Meghan's jams into the mix wouldn't have cost them anything meaningful. It didn't matter if not a single jar sold. The promotional value alone would have justified the shelf space. Studios and entertainment companies have been running these experiential retail spaces for years. HBO did it brilliantly when they dominated television with Sex and the City and 6 Feet Under. You could walk into their store on 42nd Street in New York and pick up branded merchandise that made perfect Christmas gifts. The products moved because people connected with the shows. That's the playbook Netflix was following with their Dallas location. Create an experience, let fans take home a piece of that world, generate organic buzz when people post about their visits on social media. Under that model, featuring Meghan should have been a no-brainer. She could have shown up for the ribbon cutting, posted content about the launch, driven her followers to check out the space. It would have been mutually beneficial publicity. The fact that Netflix chose not to include her products speaks volumes about where this relationship actually stands. They didn't even pretend to soften the blow with excuses about products not being ready or timing not working out. They just quietly excluded her from their biggest retail moment of the year. While other Netflix personalities and properties got prominent placement in a space designed to celebrate the platform's winners, American Riviera Orchard got nothing. Not even a mention. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Meghan had positioned herself as a Netflix success story, their entry into lifestyle brand partnerships. Instead, they'd positioned her as someone not worth the shelf space in a glorified pop-up shop, and the retail humiliation was only just beginning. Understanding why Meghan allegedly refused to share her sales figures requires looking at how she's handled questions about her business performance from the very beginning. Every interview, every public appearance where American Riviera Orchard came up, she pivoted away from concrete details with the skill of a politician dodging scandal. When Emma from Bloomberg Originals sat down with her for what should have been a straightforward business conversation, Meghan managed to avoid providing a single meaningful metric. Bloomberg, the pattern was unmistakable. Meghan would enthusiastically declare that products had sold out, carefully avoiding any mention of how many units that actually represented. If you make 10 jars of jam and sell 10 jars, congratulations, you've sold out. But that's not a business, that's a hobby. Real retailers, real business partners, they need to see volume. They need to understand market demand, pricing strategies, profit margins. They need data that proves scaling up makes financial sense. Meghan offered none of that, just vague assurances that everything was going wonderfully and people absolutely loved what she was creating. Word from those familiar with the Netflix situation suggests her reasoning for withholding sales figures was twofold. On one hand, she apparently believed Netflix would be envious of her success. This framing positions her as protecting her own interests from a jealous corporate entity that might try to take credit for her accomplishments or demand a larger piece of the pie. It's a narrative that casts her as the savvy entrepreneur standing up to the big bad studio. The reality check here is pretty straightforward, though. Netflix doesn't need to be jealous of a jam company. They're a multi-billion-dollar entertainment empire. If American Riviera Orchard was genuinely successful, they'd want to amplify that success because it reflects well on their partnership decisions. The more likely explanation, and the one people close to the situation seem to believe, is that Meghan simply couldn't admit how badly things had failed. The sales figures would have exposed the truth. Despite the glossy promotional videos, the celebrity friends receiving PR packages, the carefully staged content showing her in sun-drenched orchards, looking every bit the California lifestyle guru, nobody was actually buying the products in meaningful numbers. Major retailers had passed, online sales were minimal. The brand existed more as an Instagram aesthetic than an actual functioning business. Sharing those numbers with Netflix would have meant acknowledging reality. It would have required admitting that the female entrepreneur narrative she'd been selling wasn't matching the business results she was delivering. And Meghan has never been particularly skilled at accepting responsibility when things go wrong. Her approach has always been to find someone else to blame, to reframe failure as someone else's fault, to maintain the illusion of success even as everything crumbles around her. The truth she was hiding would soon become impossible to conceal. While the Netflix house exclusion made headlines, industry insiders reveal an even more damaging reality had been playing out behind the scenes for months. Meghan had actively pitched American Riviera Orchard to every major retailer in the country: Target, Kohl's, Bloomingdale's, Macy's, Nordstrom, the full roster of stores where celebrity lifestyle brands typically find their home and generate serious revenue, and every single one of them said no, not interested, not right now, not ever. This wasn't a case of stores wanting to wait and see how the brand performed before committing. This was flat-out rejection. During the most crucial retail season of the year, when stores are desperately looking for products that will drive holiday shopping traffic, not one major retailer wanted to stock her jams, her candles, her dog biscuits, or whatever else she'd managed to produce. Think about the significance of that for a moment. Retailers live and die by the Christmas season. They need products that will move, that will generate buzz, that will get people through the doors and clicking add to cart online. If they believed American Riviera Orchard had even a chance of being profitable, they would have taken the gamble. The contrast with other celebrity lifestyle brands makes this failure even more glaring. Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, despite all the controversy and ridiculous products, secured major retail partnerships. Reese Witherspoon's ventures found shelf space. Even reality stars with fraction of Meghan's supposed cultural cachet managed to get their products into stores. Blake Lively, Jessica Alba, Rihanna with Fenty Beauty, Selena Gomez with Rare Beauty. These women understood that launching a lifestyle brand requires more than pretty packaging and aspirational photography. It requires a genuine connection with consumers who actually want to buy what you're selling. Meghan had the profile. She'd been a working royal married to a prince, featured in countless magazine covers and news stories. The name recognition was there. The problem was everything else. Her approval ratings had tanked. Public perception had shifted dramatically since she left the royal family. The victim narrative that dominated the Oprah interview and the Netflix documentary had worn thin with audiences who were tired of hearing complaints from someone living in a Montecito mansion. When she tried to pivot to girl boss entrepreneur, people weren't buying it. Literally, retailers know their customers. They study buying patterns, demographic trends, market research that tells them exactly which celebrity brands will succeed and which will collect dust on shelves. The data on Meghan must have been absolutely brutal. No amount of royal-adjacent glamour could overcome the fundamental reality that consumers didn't want to support her business ventures. They weren't interested in her jams at any price point. They weren't lining up to buy candles that smelled like her favorite scents. The market had spoken, and what it said was devastating. Even her most devoted fans weren't converting into customers, and if you can't monetize the people who actively support you, there's no path forward for a retail brand. But the rejection from stores wasn't even her biggest problem. The beginning had looked so promising, or at least Meghan had made it look that way. Remember the White video launch earlier this year? That carefully produced moment when she announced Netflix wasn't just her television partner anymore. They were her business partner now. She'd thought about it, she told the camera with that practiced smile, and decided this was the right move, as if Netflix had been begging for the opportunity, and she'd graciously agreed to let them in on her brilliant venture. The framing positioned her as the one in control, the entrepreneur making strategic decisions about who deserved access to her brand. Netflix, for their part, seemed genuinely excited initially. This was going to be their first-person-based retail partnership, a groundbreaking move that would prove streaming platforms could extend beyond content into actual product lines. The executive head of content reportedly championed the idea, seeing potential in combining Meghan's lifestyle content with tangible products viewers could purchase. It was synergy. It was innovative. It was exactly the kind of integrated entertainment and commerce model that forward-thinking companies were exploring. But that enthusiasm evaporated faster than anyone could have predicted. Within months, the cracks were showing. By the time her cooking show filmed, tensions were already building. Netflix had expected collaboration, transparency, regular updates on product development, and sales strategies. What they got instead was secrecy, deflection, and a partner who seemed more interested in controlling the narrative than building an actual business. When they offered help with social media strategy, expertise they'd developed promoting countless successful shows and personalities, Meghan turned them down. She knew better, apparently. She had her own vision. That vision, as it turned out, involved making very small batches of products, sending them to celebrity friends for Instagram photo opportunities, and declaring everything sold out without ever scaling up to meet actual demand. Netflix watched this unfold with growing frustration. They'd attached their name to this venture. They'd promoted it through their platform. They'd positioned Meghan as a serious entrepreneur launching something meaningful, and what they got in return was essentially an expensive hobby being passed off as a business empire. The relationship soured completely when Netflix finally asked for what any legitimate business partner would expect. Show us the sales data. Let us see the numbers so we can make informed decisions about how to move forward. That's when Meghan allegedly told them they had no right to her figures. She'd somehow convinced herself that Netflix was the problem, that they were being unreasonable by wanting basic business metrics. The same metrics every retailer, every investor, every serious partner would demand before committing additional resources. Netflix executives aren't stupid. They'd seen this movie before. An influencer or celebrity with more image than substance. Someone who talks a good game but can't deliver results. The difference was that most people in that position eventually admit they need help or acknowledge that things aren't working. Meghan did neither. She doubled down on secrecy, on controlling information, on pretending everything was fine even as the entire partnership collapsed around her. And Netflix's patience was running out faster than anyone realized. The first real sign that Meghan's Netflix relationship was crumbling came months before the American Riviera Orchard disaster reached its peak. She'd landed a cameo in an Amazon MGM film, playing herself in what should have been a clever little surprise for audiences. Except here's the thing about celebrity cameos. The entire point, the only reason studios cast famous people in brief appearances is to generate buzz right before the project releases. You want audiences walking out of theaters, telling their friends they can't believe who just showed up on screen. That organic word of mouth sells tickets. Meghan apparently missed that memo. Or more likely, she couldn't resist the attention of announcing her own involvement long before Amazon wanted the news out there. She leaked her own cameo, destroying the surprise element that was literally the entire value proposition of hiring her in the first place. Amazon executives were reportedly furious. They'd cast her specifically for that shock moment, that water cooler conversation starter that gets people interested in seeing the film. Instead, the news dropped so far in advance that by the time the movie actually released, nobody would care anymore. The surprise was gone. The trump card was wasted. Think about the most memorable celebrity cameos in recent film history. Mike Tyson showing up in The Hangover. The entire audience screamed. People left the theater buzzing about it, texting their friends, buying tickets for people who hadn't seen it yet just so they could watch their reaction. That's what cameos are supposed to do. They're strategic marketing tools that create genuine excitement, but they only work if audiences don't know they're coming. The moment you announce it months in advance, you've killed the golden goose. Any publicist with even basic industry knowledge understands this. Celebrity appearances are tightly coordinated, carefully timed to maximize impact. The reveal happens close to release, when the momentum can actually translate into box office numbers or streaming views. Meghan's decision to leak her own casting didn't just undermine Amazon's strategy, it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how Hollywood actually works. She thought she was generating valuable publicity for herself, staying relevant by announcing a new project. What she actually did was burn a bridge with another major studio and prove to everyone watching that working with her comes with unnecessary headaches. The fallout was immediate in industry circles. Other studios that had been considering cameos or small roles for Meghan quietly backed away. Why take the risk? Why deal with someone who can't follow basic protocols about when and how to announce projects? The entertainment industry runs on relationships, on trust, on knowing that when you bring someone into a project, they'll play by the rules that make everyone successful. Meghan had proven she either couldn't or wouldn't do that. Netflix was paying attention. They watched her sabotage an Amazon project through sheer ego and impatience. They saw the criticism that followed, the eye-rolling from industry insiders who couldn't believe someone would be so unprofessional, and they started wondering what other disasters were waiting to happen if they continued backing her ventures. That cameo disaster would haunt her in ways she never imagined. If there's one skill Meghan has mastered over the years, it's the art of avoiding responsibility when things go wrong. Watch how she operates and you'll see the same pattern repeat endlessly. Something fails, someone else gets blamed, and somehow she emerges positioned as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. With American Riviera Orchard, she allegedly tried to claim that a Netflix executive suggested the entire concept. Not her idea, you understand. She was simply following through on someone else's vision. That way, when the brand inevitably collapsed, she could point fingers at the person who supposedly pitched it in the first place. The same playbook appeared with the Harry and Meghan documentary. Remember her interview with Variety? She made a point of explaining how they'd handed the project over to director Liz Garbus. They were just hoping Liz would be able to tell their story through her lens. Translation? If the documentary received criticism, if people found it self-indulgent or tone-deaf or boring, well, that was on Liz. Meghan and Harry had simply entrusted their story to someone else. Any creative missteps were the director's responsibility, not theirs. Never mind that they sat for extensive interviews, that they provided all the material, that they had approval over the final product. Nope, Liz Garbus made the documentary. They just participated. This pattern of deflection runs through every failed venture. The Spotify podcast deal that went nowhere? The creative differences with Spotify executives who allegedly didn't understand her vision. The Archewell Foundation that struggled to gain traction? The media was too focused on negativity instead of celebrating their humanitarian work. The strained relationships with royal family members? Everyone else's fault. From jealous Kate, to unsupportive Charles, to racist institution members who refuse to protect her. In Meghan's version of events, she's perpetually the victim of other people's incompetence, jealousy, or malice. But here's where that strategy finally stopped working. With American Riviera Orchard, there was nobody left to blame. She'd distanced herself from Netflix's input. She'd rejected their social media help. She'd refused to share sales figures that might have allowed them to course correct. She'd positioned herself as the visionary entrepreneur making all the decisions, the boss babe running her empire exactly how she wanted. Which meant when the empire crumbled, when retailers rejected her products and Netflix excluded her from their showcase and public interest evaporated, there was no scapegoat available. She'd backed herself into a corner where the only logical conclusion was that maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't everyone else. Maybe the problem was her approach, her products, her complete inability to understand what building a successful business actually requires. Maybe audiences were tired of the victim narrative and the blame shifting and the constant positioning of herself as some misunderstood genius, surrounded by people who couldn't appreciate her brilliance. Maybe the market had simply decided she wasn't worth supporting anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. The retailers who passed, the Netflix executives who walked away, the plummeting public interest that even gossip columnists couldn't ignore. But this time, there was no one left to blame. The numbers tell a story that's almost impossible to believe. If you remember how obsessed the world was with Meghan just a few years ago, Rob Shooter, a veteran gossip columnist who makes his living tracking celebrity relevance, recently broke down the brutal mathematics of her cultural collapse. He explained that Meghan's stories used to generate 100% engagement on his platform. Everyone read them. The people who loved her, the people who hated her, they all clicked, they all commented, they all shared their opinions. That's the dream scenario for anyone in entertainment media. Total audience capture. Now, 20%, that's what's left. Her hardcore fans still show up, maybe 10% of the total audience. Her hardcore haters still hate watch, another 10%. But that massive 80% middle ground, the casual observers who once found her fascinating enough to follow along, they've completely tuned out. They're not hate-watching anymore. They're not defending her anymore. They're just gone. Moved on to other celebrities, other stories, other drama that feels less exhausting and more entertaining. In politics, they'd be called independents. In entertainment, they're just the audience that determines whether someone stays relevant or fades into obscurity. What makes this collapse so remarkable is that even villains usually maintain their hate-watching audience. Bethany Frankel has made an entire career out of being polarizing. People who can't stand her still watch her content because she's entertaining in her awfulness. The same goes for countless reality stars who've turned public disdain into sustainable careers. They understand that hate-watching is still watching. Negative engagement is still engagement. As long as people care enough to tune in, even if it's just to criticize, you remain relevant. You remain profitable. Meghan has somehow managed to lose even that. She's exhausted everyone. The constant victim narrative, the endless positioning of herself as misunderstood and mistreated, the blame shifting and the lack of self-awareness. It's all just too much. Audiences who once loved watching her drama unfold now find her tedious. The people who enjoyed criticizing her have run out of energy because she never changes, never learns, never does anything unexpected enough to warrant continued attention. She's become predictable in the most boring way possible. Rob Shooter admitted something that should terrify anyone trying to maintain a public profile. He's a gossip columnist. He literally makes money by covering celebrity stories. And even he can't justify spending hours researching Meghan content anymore because he knows his readers won't engage with it. When the professionals whose job is to feed the celebrity news cycle start avoiding someone because there's no audience left, that's the definition of irrelevance. That's career death in the entertainment industry. The comparison to her launch as a royal family member is staggering. She went from one of the most talked about women in the world to someone who can't even generate curiosity anymore. Not love, not hate, just complete and total apathy. The public has moved on. The media has moved on. Even the people who built their platforms partly on covering her every move have moved on. The numbers told a story she couldn't spin away. The promotional content for Meghan's Netflix holiday special, dropping December 3rd, perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with her brand strategy. There she is, wandering through a sun-drenched orchard with a sweater casually draped over her shoulders, looking like she's starring in a Napa Valley tourism commercial rather than promoting a Christmas show. Nothing about the aesthetic screams holiday cheer. No red, no green, no twinkling lights, no warmth. Just beige on beige on beige, because apparently Meghan believes sophisticated means devoid of joy. The color scheme for her American Riviera Orchard Christmas collection sparked immediate backlash online. Brown stockings hanging by the fireplace, taupe gift wrap, neutral tones everywhere you look. People joked that her home must feel like a sad orphanage from a Dickens novel rather than a festive family space. She's got 2 small children, but you'd never know it from the joyless earth tones dominating every frame. Where's the magic? Where's the excitement that makes Christmas special for kids? It's all sacrificed at the altar of whatever aesthetic Meghan thinks communicates class and elegance. Here's where the timing gets interesting. The special was originally supposed to drop in November, which would have made sense for a Thanksgiving-themed release. Instead, Meghan changed it to December 3rd, which just happens to be the exact same week Princess Catherine holds her annual Christmas Carol concert. Catherine has been doing this event since 2021, and it's become one of the most beloved royal traditions, broadcast on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day to massive audiences. Everyone who follows the royal calendar knows when it happens, first week of December, like clockwork. So Meghan either deliberately scheduled her special to compete with Catherine's concert, or she's remarkably oblivious to the calendar of the family she spent years complaining about. Either option is bad. If it's intentional, it shows she's still obsessed with a one-sided rivalry that makes her look petty and desperate. If it's accidental, it demonstrates a shocking lack of awareness about the cultural events that will completely overshadow her own project. Catherine just announced Kate Winslet as a participant this year, an Oscar-winning British actress joining a beloved royal tradition centered on love and community. The contrast with Meghan's beige stockings and mystery guest list couldn't be more stark. Speaking of guests, nobody knows who's actually appearing in Meghan's holiday special. The promotional content focused entirely on her arranging gifts and looking pleased with herself for completing the most basic tasks. There was this moment in the promo where she places something in a stocking and then does this little satisfied gesture like she's just accomplished something extraordinary. She looked genuinely proud of herself for putting an item into fabric. That perfectly encapsulates how out of touch the entire production feels. She thinks we'll be impressed by watching her perform mundane activities while wearing neutral cashmere. Even Netflix seemed embarrassed. When Meghan posted her promotional images to Instagram, people immediately checked Netflix's official account, expecting to see coordinated marketing. Nothing. Not a single post acknowledging the show's existence. The silence was deafening, and the timing of that release would backfire spectacularly. The way Netflix is ending their relationship with Meghan tells you everything about how Hollywood really works when someone becomes more trouble than they're worth. They're not firing her with some dramatic public statement. They're not releasing press releases about creative differences or mutual decisions to part ways. Instead, they're executing what people in the industry call death by 1,000 cuts. slowly, methodically, systematically dismantling the partnership while allowing Meghan to humiliate herself by insisting everything is fine. It's almost cruel in its efficiency. Watch the pattern. First, her products get excluded from Netflix house while every other successful property gets featured. Then reports surface that the holiday special will likely be her last project with the platform. Industry insiders start whispering that the first look deal, the arrangement that once seemed like a golden ticket to entertainment success, is essentially dead. Netflix isn't renewing. They're not developing new projects with the Sussexes. They're just waiting for existing commitments to expire so they can quietly move on without the mess of a public breakup. This approach benefits Netflix more than an outright termination would. They avoid looking like the bad guys who dumped a duchess. They don't have to deal with accusations of racism or lack of support for female entrepreneurs. They simply let the relationship fade away naturally, pulled back support gradually enough that each individual step seems reasonable. Not stocking products in a pop-up shop, the products weren't ready. Not promoting the holiday special aggressively, they promote lots of content at different levels. Not renewing the overall deal, creative priorities shift. It's all very diplomatic and completely devastating. Meanwhile, Meghan keeps posting like everything is wonderful. She shares promotional content for the holiday special. She presumably tells Harry that Netflix loves working with them and this is all just part of the business. But anyone paying attention can see the writing on the wall. The streaming platform that once seemed so excited to partner with royalty has realized what so many others learned before them. Working with Meghan means dealing with someone who won't take direction, won't share information, won't accept responsibility, and won't deliver results that justify the headaches. Without Netflix backing, without retail partnerships, without products anyone wants to buy, American Riviera Orchard is finished. The brand existed more as an Instagram fantasy than a functioning business anyway. A few jars of jam sent to celebrity friends, some candles allegedly shipped with no wicks, dog biscuits that never materialized for actual sale. It was all smoke and mirrors, expensive lifestyle photography masquerading as entrepreneurship, and now even the smoke is clearing. The question everyone is asking is how Meghan explains this to Harry. How does she spin the collapse of yet another venture that was supposed to prove she didn't need the royal family, that she could build her own empire, that leaving Britain was the right choice? How many times can she blame other people before even Harry starts wondering if maybe the common denominator in all these failures is her? The Netflix rejection, the retail rejection, the public rejection. The brand was dead. The question was whether she'd ever admit it. So what do you think? Is this the final nail in the coffin for Meghan's brand empire? Or will she somehow find a way to spin this disaster into her next victim narrative? Can Netflix really walk away quietly? Or will Meghan force a public confrontation that makes everything even messier? And honestly, how long before Harry wakes up and realizes he's funded failure after failure while his wife refuses to admit any of it is her fault? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us if you think American Riviera Orchard ever had a chance, or if this was doomed from the start. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of Meghan's spectacular collapse, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more royal drama coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The next video is waiting, and you won't believe what's coming next.